Hey, what's going on everyone out there? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. So Final Fantasy XVI. I've been wanting to talk about this game for quite some time, and it's been a hot minute with vacation and everything else, but now I finally get to sit down and actually discuss this game because there is so much to say because of how good the game is, how much stuff it actually gives to you, as well as all the discourse that's been surrounding this game ever since it first came out on PlayStation 5. Now, for me personally, I rolled credits on Final Fantasy XVI. I played this a ton ever since I first picked it up. I was non-stop just playing through this game. I wasn't going through every single side quest or anything like, as far as minor stuff is concerned, but I did want to complete the main quest, at least do a bunch of side quests, take in all the visuals and the exploration of Final Fantasy XVI, and to be honest with you, after everything that I've done, which was about close to around 40 hours or so, I was pretty darn satisfied with what this game was giving to people. The cool thing is that not only does Final Fantasy XVI look fantastic, like the visuals are absolutely stunning, but it also sounds fantastic too. The music of Final Fantasy games, I always said, was like really special. With Final Fantasy XVI in particular, I feel like the music is awesome and very clever because they not only have their own original music, which is great. Every single Final Fantasy game has its own soundtrack of music that just sounds awesome, but they also play around a little bit with some of the Final Fantasy themes, specifically the very first Final Fantasy theme, which is called the Prelude. It's that piano intro that kind of goes up and down with the scales, as well as also that main theme that we had from the original Final Fantasy game. Everybody's heard of this if you're into JRPGs or role-playing games in general. You probably have heard this theme at some point. And what they do in Final Fantasy XVI is they really play around with the way that the song or the theme sounds, either kind of messing around with some of the octaves and a few other things, and applying it to different settings and contexts that really make this music sound fantastic and really add to a lot of the scenes of which are going on in the story. Now, speaking of story, I felt that the plot of Final Fantasy XVI was very interesting and very clever. It not only feels much more mature in tone in comparison to many other mainline Final Fantasy games, but it also is done with a purpose. I never felt like the momentum of the story of Final Fantasy XVI, as far as the main quest line is concerned, never really slowed down or became boring at any point. I was always invested with what was going on, even though I might have forgotten a couple elements here and there, especially with a lot of different characters you're coming across, a lot of different politics that are involving many of the kingdoms that you actually go visit or that you see involved with some of the main story stuff. I feel like even though it gets very complicated, which is why we have the active time lore stuff, but still, as complicated as it was, it never felt boring. It was always intriguing. It was always interesting. There was always something new that kind of caught my interest and really pulled my attention and made things even more crazier and much more intriguing for me to follow along this entire 40 plus hours that I was playing this game. I thought the story was good for that stuff, and then everything else built around it just made everything else feel like gravy. It was so good as far as an experience is concerned. Now, as far as some of the characters, I do have to say that I do enjoy Clive as the main character. I feel like he's multi-layered, and even though there's certain elements to his personality that feel a little bit shallow, everything going on with his backstory, with his relationships with Jill, with his brother Joshua, and many of the other characters that he meets along the way, I thought was also very interesting. It didn't feel like a character that felt like he was one note. It didn't feel like a character that was just very shallow in general, as far as his personality being kind of a drag or anything else. There was nothing about Clive, or any of the characters for that matter, that felt like they were just kind of forcefully just injected into this. They didn't seem boring, they didn't seem useless. They felt very, very purposeful, and they felt very intriguing. And you could say that about most of the cast in this game. I felt Clive was the one that, again, you spend the most time with, that I gravitated to the most, but I like Jill as a character with her relationship with Clive. I love Joshua with all the stuff that he does throughout the story. I felt that Sid was actually pretty interesting, and he seemed pretty cool, especially towards the beginning of the game. And as you start to see things kind of unfold, and you start to see some of the stuff that these characters do, it becomes ever more interesting. It's just, again, overall a cool story with some crazy stuff that goes on that you definitely have to see whenever you can. So the main reason why we play games like Final Fantasy XVI is because of its gameplay, which to me could be split up into two sections, both the combat and the exploration. The combat of Final Fantasy XVI I felt was very good. It felt very good to play through. It felt like you had all these different abilities at your disposal. The combat and the different battles you could get into, especially with groups of enemies, it's absolutely over the top. You could really get into a groove using all these different attacks and stuff and linking different like combos together between your different icon abilities that you eventually open up as you play through the main quest. I always felt like the game was at its best when I had a bunch of enemies that were just coming at me and I could just switch between the different icon abilities and actually use these attacks that take out like groups of them together out. And it was just so much fun. It was so awesome. It looked fantastic. Like, just overall, the visuals of this game look awesome, but in battle specifically, the visuals really get to go over the top, and it makes Clive look good, it makes the enemies look good, it just makes things just feel great overall. And then of course I have to talk about these boss battles, which between the icon battles themselves, which feel like kaiju, like anime-esque battles, which are absolutely crazy and they look spectacular, but also even the mini bosses, like some of those side bosses you could find with the different hunts and stuff, those fights could get very vicious. The one big thing I will say about some of these like battles is that sometimes the difficulty could be a little bit all over the place, especially with some of that side content when you haven't really leveled up all that much. The difficulty spikes in various sections could be a little bit annoying, but never annoying to the point where it actually ruins the experience. Like, you could always come back to those sections and level up a little bit, open up some new abilities, get some new equipment, and come back and really dominate those bosses. But overall, as a whole, throughout my entire experience with Final Fantasy XVI, the combat was amazing. The combat just felt good, it looked good, it sounded good, it was absolutely over the top with some of the mainline quest stuff. When you start getting to like the last couple sections of the game with the story, and you start seeing like these battles that just end up getting so wild. Like, it reminded me a little bit of Asura's Wrath, mixed in with elements of like Devil May Cry, Nier Automata, and then a couple of like elements from Final Fantasy games. But when they start going really over the top with some of these icon battles, like, things just get crazy. It reminded me so much of Asura's Wrath, like when you start going to space. Like, that's how ridiculous some of these fights could get. And as far as the spectacle is concerned, as far as the experience of playing this game, I thought these were awesome. These were just like super fantastic and were a joy, and you have to see them when you get a chance. As far as some of the lesser things about the combat, I am in agreement with everybody else out there that's played this game that Final Fantasy XVI is a little bit on the easier side. There's certain battles that just feel like a cakewalk to go through, while others here and there, especially in some of the side content, are much more tougher to deal with. But still, overall, when it comes to difficulty, I still found that this game was enjoyable to play through. It was challenging enough, but never too challenging to the point to make it not fun to play through. So at least I give the game credit for that. There is a harder difficulty mode called Final Fantasy mode that makes things exponentially harder, but that's really more if you really want the challenge, you really want to try to master the combat and all these other little nuances of the battle system. Outside of that, if you're just playing through the game just once to actually enjoy the experience, I think you'll be totally fine here. Now, as far as the other side of the gameplay, the exploration, this is where I find that the game has some good elements to it, but tends to falter just a little bit. To me, the different sections you could go to within this world of Celestia didn't really always feel like a lush world that I was immersed in. Like, there was these open environments I get to explore, I get to travel around, which is totally fine. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Final Fantasy XV with just how vast some of these areas can be. And it's awesome to see, like, you can get into battles in real time with enemies that are just out there. But when it comes to, like, actual side content or things that just make this world feel really good to, like, explore with, it didn't really kind of hit that mark for me. It felt like things were just kind of there. It felt like things were just kind of, you know, just placed there in random little spots and never really kind of like made this world feel like something I could be immersed in. Some people have said like the side content with some of the stories and stuff is a little bit shallow, and I could totally understand that, especially with some of those side stories that just feel like they don't really go anywhere. And also on top of that, I should mention too, some of the dialogue for a lot of these side quests aren't given voice acting. So they're just kind of like thrown in there. Maybe they're just trying to like save like memory or space, or kind of like save on costs for development. I don't know, but at least it did stand out to me in comparison to all the other stuff that was given like such high production value as far as the voice acting, the visuals and the presentation, what you're doing with those quests, and all this other stuff. It just felt a little bit weird here as I started to explore different areas of the world around me. Now, despite all that being said, despite how much fun I actually had playing through Final Fantasy XVI, the discourse that I saw about this game online on social media and in various websites seemed to be all over the place. There were so many outlets like Kotaku, Polygon, and many other websites that were just dunking on this game or completely misrepresenting it, both with the story, with the characters, the gameplay itself, like the combat. There were just so many places that I saw that were just making statements about this game and talking about Final Fantasy XVI that was clearly not representative of what I actually just played through. And I thought that was pretty sad because Final Fantasy XVI is doing so many things right. It's doing something different in a series that is constantly trying to reiterate itself and trying to push the boundaries and try things that are different with each new successive mainline entry. And it was just a shame because with all the good that this game was doing, there just seems to be so many places that were just looking just to dunk on it. And I thought that was a real shame. What I thought was even crazier was that people were really dunking on the story specifically with some of the characters like Jill, making statements about her and her character and some of the other stuff that goes on. That clearly was not the case. It felt like a lot of places were not even really playing this game through, like maybe playing the first couple of hours and then just feeling like they saw everything that the game had to offer. Yet within a 30 to 40 hour experience, there were so many things that were going on with Final Fantasy XVI, let alone the beginning of the game still is pretty freaking awesome. So I thought that was a shame. I thought that was sad. And it really came to show me that like so many people were just out of touch with what was going on with FF16. And by the time I was done, I felt like what was going on with this game was so good and just so not the same thing like what people were saying for like a week or two. It was just absolutely nuts. Anyway, when all is said and done, can I recommend that you play Final Fantasy XVI on PlayStation 5 or eventually on any platform? Yes. This game is fantastic. I feel like it's one of the best games of 2023, arguably better than some of the other games that are being said to be the game of the year. For me, when it comes to an experience, not just each individual part, when everything comes together as a whole, between the story, between the presentation, between the gameplay, between the time spent playing this game, Final Fantasy XVI, is fantastic, and you need to play it whenever you get a chance, especially if you own a PlayStation 5. I feel like this is one of the best games on PlayStation 5 currently right now. The game is just that good, and it's that much of a joy to play through. So anyway, there you go. Those are my thoughts about Final Fantasy XVI. I know this is a little bit different here, doing a review in this style. It's not the norm here on this channel, but maybe I'll kind of do more reviews kind of like this with a whole discussion type of format instead of like going through all the craziness as far as editing is concerned. It will save me a lot of time, to be honest with you. But I wanted to talk about Final Fantasy XVI because I felt that the game is really good and you definitely need to play it. And it's been a while because, you know, with Vacation and all these other games coming out, I haven't had a chance to really sit down and just talk about this game with everybody. Even though I wrote a review about it for CFTV, but I still wanted to talk about it with all of you guys here on the channel. But as always, with any other game that I review here on this channel, those are just my opinions about Final Fantasy XVI. Let me know some of your thoughts about this game in the comment section down below. Tell me, have you gotten a chance to pick up FF16? Are you a big Final Fantasy fan in general? What do you want to see from the Final Fantasy series moving forward? Like, what are some of the things that you felt like worked or didn't work that you actually want to be iterated on in the next entry of the series, whether it's a spin-off or a mainline game? Talk to me about that stuff in the comment section down below. This channel is sponsored by Flynn's Arcade and More, located in Margate, Florida. Flynn's is one of the premier spots for gaming fans in South Florida. They have a variety of arcade games on cabinet for you to play throughout the week, including all of your beloved classics. You could also play a ton of new and current console games too, on PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo consoles. Grab a snack or drink and enjoy the best gaming experience you'll find. Visit during one of their many big events to connect with the gaming community in South Florida. Want to test your skills in competitive fighting games? Join any of the weekly tournaments that happen at Flynn's for a chance for some cool prizes. And if you're into tabletop gaming or model kit building, there's a bunch of events there for you too. Swing by Flynn's Arcade and More, located in Margate Boulevard in Margate, Florida. You won't find a better spot than Flynn's. Hey, thanks everyone for watching this video. I appreciate your support as always, and hope that you can subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. I'll have a few more great ones for you to check out in the end cards afterwards. Don't forget you could join my Discord server via the link in the description to be part of the community and come hang out with everyone, talking games and more. I hope to see you around again sometime soon. Peace out and stay epic, everyone.